I invite the first agent of the applicant to present pleadings. Please state how much time you will use for your pleadings.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Excellencies. My name is Lumina Vera, and I'm the agent for the applicant in this case, the state of Virginia, alongside with my colleague, Mr. Felipe. For the following 40 minutes, I will be addressing the first two submissions to the court, and my colleague will be addressing the remaining two during 30 minutes. Your Excellencies, will you be requiring a summary of the facts regarding the present case?
No, it's not. We know the case very well.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. I will refer now to the first two submissions we want to present to the court, which are the fact that Argenium's use of Power 3 was in conformity with international law, as well as proving that Argenium is not liable for the destruction of their aid. My colleague will present to you the submissions regarding negligence, violation of international law, and liability for the destruction of the Power 2. Your Excellencies, I will now explain why Argenium acted in accordance with international law. And in order to prove this, we will demonstrate that laser beams cannot be characterized as a weapon of mass destruction. Also, in the present case, the use of force is justified due to a state of necessity. And finally, Argenium's response was indeed in accordance with the general principles of international law, as its only intention was to protect its own national sovereignty. Firstly, Argenium is a small state island, and due to its size, it's unable to maintain adequate and viable armed forces. The deployment of the bomber system constitutes its only means of safeguarding the national security, thus fulfilling its international obligation established in Article 1st of the Outer Space Treaty, since the deployment of the bomber system contributes to the defense of the state and does not prevent other states from exploring and using outer space. Our representative also fulfills its national obligations established in Articles 1st and 2nd of the United Nations Charter, namely the right of self-determination and the principle of sovereign equality. This is evidenced in the fact that Argenium can freely determine the resources they will use to support the state, in this case, the Culver system. Secondly, it's important to consider that our client holds the supreme authority within its territory, and therefore can exclude from their domain another states. In this case, Kazov was conducting spying activities on Kazov's military sites and infrastructure. So it's the right of Argenium to maintain the territorial integrity and political independence. Argenium also acted according to Article 4 of the Outer Space Treaty, as it did not place any kind of weapon of mass destruction in outer space. Your Excellencies, the Commission for Conventional Armaments in the United Nations General Assembly in the Resolution 32-84B have given a definition of weapon of mass destruction, and I quote, atomic explosive weapons, radioactive material weapons, lethal, chemical, and biological weapons, and any weapon developed in the future which have characteristics comparable in destructive effect of those of the atomic bomb or other weapons. Hence, for a weapon to be considered of mass destruction, it should hold the capacity to cause widespread devastation, which the laser beams do not hold. This is proven since the intention of Argenium was to blind and dazzle FCAS 1607 sensors and not cause a large-scale destruction or loss of life. We also have the Articles on Responsibility of States for Internationally Wrongful Acts, the RCWA, which provides a comprehensive framework for determining whether a state is responsible or not for breaching an obligation of international law. Although these articles are not legally binding in themselves, it is a codification of customary international law and has been widely recognized and endorsed by the international community, and the principles that they embody are considered to be part of customary international law being binding to all states. In this case, the use of force is justified due to a state of necessity, established in Article 25 of the RCWA. which can be invoked when the action undertaken by the state is the only means of safeguarding an essential interest of the state against a great and imminent peril. It's
Is it a question on this point? You are arguing that the use of force becomes infraction and is justified by customary law, while treaty law, the Articles Treaty provides for peaceful purposes. Can you explain how this activity of the state is intended to be peaceful as opposed to use of force?
The state of necessity is recognized in customary law for precluding the lawfulness of an act in conformity with an international obligation. In this case, there is an imminent peril, which is that the internal affairs of another nation, in this case the Armenian, are being intervened. And the only way that Armenian has to protect this essential interest, being the existing and national sovereignty of the country, is the use of the public fleet, since it cannot use armed forces because it cannot have them due to its size. Thank you, Excellency. The International Law Commission, with the Torrey Canyon incident, in which the United Kingdom used chemical dispersants to break up the oil spilled by the oil tanker Torrey Canyon, also demonstrated that under certain circumstances, a state may justify taking actions that normally would be prohibited under international law if it's necessary to protect an essential interest. In this case, there was no other reasonable option to stop Kazov's espionage activities, since the claims of Kazov ambassadors that ELCA 1607 was deployed merely for commercial reasons is not convincing enough if we take a look at the history of confrontation that both states have had during the time, adding the fact that the services of intelligence of Rebellion have cross-checked the information about ELCA 1607. Your Excellencies, I will now demonstrate why the applicant is not liable for the destruction of Pier 8. First of all, Armenian acted with due regard. Second, the respondent is responsible for the activities conducted by non-governmental entities. And third, Armenian acted according to a state of necessity. The destruction of Pier 8 was not intentional, and it was not a deliberate act of aggression from Armenian against Galician. It was an unintended and lamentable consequence of the actions that Armenian took to protect its national sovereignty and security. And first of all, following the Liability Convention in its Article 3, a representative cannot be held liable since it would require for them to cause the damage due to its own fault or for the fault of people for whom it is responsible. Armenian performed its action with due regard, and doctrine, as column commentaries, has defined this concept as the performance of an act with a certain standard of care, attention, or observance. In the present case, our representative consulted with a highly reputable company, which is Charal Inc., for the targeting data of ELCA 1607. This company is the one that failed to provide the accurate information, not being Armenian responsible for the damage that was caused, nor people for whom it is responsible. In this case, the damage was provoked by Charal Inc. and the inaccuracy of the information.
As you said, I read the article of the treaty. The fault may be due also to persons who are responsible under the jurisdiction of the state. So the company is under your supervision.
Mm-hmm.
How come maybe a fault of the company but not of your state as such?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
How
question?
come can it be a technical fault of the company providing information but not of your own behavior as a state?
In this case, the fault means to act with a certain standard of care.
And you would say that the company did not fulfill the technical standards.
Mm-hmm.
But yet your decision was based on that information.
Charal Inc. is a company that has a reputation for being liable. And in that case,
everybody can commit a fault or lack of standards.
Mm-hmm.
In the the end, what matters is the damage done and the fault, right? So,
Argelium chooses to act under the information provided by Charal Inc. because Charal Inc. is reputable and it has not failed another country to give the information correctly. And even if it did once, it shouldn't tarnish the reputation of a company. We know of companies in the present time that have had incidents and they have not been tarnished due to that. And not because of that, they are less reliable. So in this case, when Argelium chooses to act on that information, is doing what it's supposed to do as a person or company in this case, that is acting with due regard because it's doing the consultations that it should be doing to someone who can be considered an authority in the case. Thank you. As I was saying, according to Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, Collegium must restrain the company's activities through authorization and continued supervision over them in order to assure that the activities are carried out in conformity with the international provisions of the treaties. I also want to point out that in this case, applicants acted diligently and Collegium failed to supervise and authorize the company's actions, allowing them to create more risk in actions that already have inherent risks. I would finally like to add that Argelium should be that Collegium should be held liable for the destruction. Argelium should not be held liable for the destruction of their aid. And this is important, and this part is important, the Dialog case, which is a landmark in the field of international space law, and it addresses the issue of the nationality of companies. And this court held that the nationality of a company is determined by the place of incorporation, referring to the country in which the company is registered or incorporated, and the nationality of individuals who own and control the company. In this case, we can establish that the nationality of Charal Inc. is the one of Collegium. And since the damage was provoked by the company, the provisions of the Liability Convention shouldn't be applicable to the case, as Article 7 establishes that they will not apply to damage that is caused by a space object of a launching state national to another state.
Please try to not read. Please just speak. You try. You can do better this. Be quiet. Okay? Again, please. Try not to read.
Sorry, what? I'm sorry?
Not to read.
Oh, okay. It's just that I was at the end of the
Just
presentation.
tell me your arguments. Not read, please.
The arguments are that Argelium is not liable for the destruction of Year 8 because Charal Inc. is a company for whom Collegium is responsible. And since Collegium is responsible for the company, has to authorize and have a continued supervision over the actions they take so they can actually comply with the rules of different treaties and international law. And in this case, given that the company knew that it was being requested or targeting data, it should have been authorized to hand it out.
Okay. Just another question. Can we talk about the harmful interference?
Sorry, what sense?
Okay. Imagine the treaty, the OST establishes that harmful interference because they are making spying in
That's
their
what they're
own.
doing.
Yes. Can we talk about is defined by the treaties, the space treaties, or not?
The OST does refer to the conjunction responsibility of states when they launch an object together or they are conjointly to be at fault for a damage that occurred. In this case, Kasov was conducting spying activities with the satellite, and Collegium is the one that chose to attack it.
Please continue.
Okay. Time is up. Please, the second agent.
Thank you,
Introduce yourself.
Mr. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, may it please the court. My name is Pepe Moya, and along with my colleague, I'm the agent for the applicant, State of Argentina. If it pleases the court, I will begin addressing the third question. Your Excellencies, Colombia's use of an anti-satellite missile against my client's Pulver-2 satellite constitutes a violation of international law. Firstly, we will demonstrate how Colombia breached the principle of maintenance of international peace and security through an act of aggression, and further prove that this action goes against the prevention of an arms race in outer space. Secondly, we will demonstrate how respondent, Colombia, did not act with due regard to the corresponding interests of other states parties, as appropriate international consultations had to be undertaken in a potentially harmful endeavor. And lastly, we will prove how Colombia breached general principles of international law, namely the principle of maintenance of international peace and security, as it is contained in Article 1 of the UN Charter, and the principle of non-use of force. First, Colombia breached the maintenance of international peace and security. This principle is contained in Article 3 of the Outer Space Treaty and in Article 1 of the UN Charter. This principle commands the United Nations to maintain, protect public tranquility, and preventing states from acting hostilely between one another. As international peace is one of the United Nations' main objectives. Colombia breached this principle as its actions constitute an act of aggression, which is defined in the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3314 as a use of force against another state, or from a state against another state. By employing a harmful weapon, such as an anti-satellite missile, against my client's property, respondent acted in a manner fundamentally inconsistent with the UN Charter. Furthermore, respondent violated the prevention of an arms race in outer space, which constitutes one of the United Nations General Assembly's gravest concerns, as it is a priority to maintain outer space free from the development of an arms race in order to promote its peaceful use and exploration. Secondly, Colombia breached Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty. This provision indicates that the states must act with due regard in the development of its space activities, with due regard to the corresponding interests of all other states parties. Colombia failed to act with due regard to my client's interests, as the destruction of its satellite prevents the development of its free use and exploration, setting back this space activity by several years, as stated on paragraph 15 of the agreed statement of facts. Furthermore, this provision establishes that appropriate international consultations must be undertaken when there's a potentially harmful endeavor. Since Colombia planned to use an anti-satellite missile against my client's Pulver-2, they had the obligation, as it was certain that this missile would damage another state's property, they had the obligation to perform and undertake appropriate international consultations in order to discuss and find another less injurious option in order to prevent Pulver-2's collision. Colombia failed to undertake these appropriate international consultations. Moreover, the representative had already taken measures to prevent Pulver-2 from colliding with other satellites, namely the use of its space-serving vehicle. Therefore, the use of an anti-satellite missile was not strictly necessary in order to prevent this catastrophe from occurring. Lastly, I would like to address the fact that Colombia's use of an anti-satellite missile also threatens the interests of other states parties apart from my client, as the debris originated from the destruction of Pulver-2 could potentially harm, by colliding against other satellites, other states' interests. This is exemplified in China's use of an anti-satellite missile against its FY-1C satellite. This anti-satellite test generated over 3,000 individual traceable pieces of debris. Traceable pieces of debris are pieces of debris that are over 5 centimeters in length, while this test generated over 30,000 untraceable pieces. The fact that these pieces are not traceable does not mean that they do not pose a threat to other states' satellites, as just any object under 5 centimeters that could collide at an extremely high velocity against a satellite could potentially destroy it or prevent its normal function. The fact that the debris originated from World War II's destruction was safely burnt up, as established on the agreed statement of facts, on the Earth's atmosphere is nothing short of a miracle. But nonetheless, Colligan was obliged to perform appropriate international consultations. In third place, Colligan breached general principles of international law. As I mentioned before, Colligan breached the principle of maintaining international peace and security, which is contained on Article 1 of the United Nations Charter.